everyone, it's Beth and I'm here to talk to you about your memoir. And as you know, you have a draft due in class on Saturday that has to be a minimum of 2 pages. And there are a couple requirements in the instruction sheet that I wanted to go over since we didn't have time to talk about them in class this week. And we will definitely look at some examples next week in class as we start to do some peer reviews and some other work in class. So the first thing I want to cover, well, actually, let me tell you the 3 things I'm covering here. So the first thing I want to cover is the requirement for you to have an epigraph. And I'll show you a quick example right here so you can see what an epigraph looks like, and I'll go over it in a minute. The second thing I want to talk to you about is your memoir's thesis statement, but I want to tell you that I won't be calling them thesis statements this semester. I'll be calling them statements of purpose. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about, which won't be visible to you in the video, you'll just hear me talking about it a little bit, maybe I can type onto the document a little, is some conclusion ideas for memoirs. So let's talk about the epigraph first. An epigraph is a passage, a quoted passage, that usually comes from another piece of literature. So you might find one in a poem or in a short story or a novel. I also think it would be appropriate for this assignment, since the memoir is a story of something personal that happened to you, that you might find some song lyrics or something like that. A line from a movie, anything could be used as an epigraph. And the purpose of an epigraph for a lot of writers is that it sort of provides a kind of focus. And I hate to bring it to this level, but it's sort of the way that it works for a lot of people. People who write memoirs and people who write novels aren't thinking specifically about using themes, but there's something in the epigraph that kind of works as a theme for the piece, even though that might not be the intention of the writer. So for us, writing a 3-page memoir for a college assignment, I think it's appropriate, more appropriate than it would be for a novelist to think about it this way, because thinking about a theme is way too limiting. I think you can think of it as a theme, think about it as a theme, or think about it as sort of the device that introduces a concept that you know you want to address or speak to. And I also want to tell you that I think it would be fine for you to write your memoir draft and then go back and find an epigraph that you think would fit after the fact, instead of finding an epigraph up front, to find something after you kind of develop a part of your draft and kind of see some of the ideas or the concepts that you're working with. And I think that would be the more authentic way to do it. But if you feel like you want the epigraph first, then you definitely should go and research it first. So here's a draft of the memoir that I started. And I decided, in fact, that I was going to go and find an epigraph first, because I decided to use my topic about moving. And I've decided to focus on the unpacking process after we arrived at our new home. So I went and found, I actually just did a random search online for famous quotes about moving. And I got a lot of interesting websites. Goodreads came up. You guys know what Goodreads is. It's a website that helps you to track books that you read. And the website itself has a lot of really interesting other pages where people can enter individual quotes, individual passages from the text that they thought were especially important. I found some quotation websites. There are lots of websites that have random quotations that people entered, or important quotations that people think should be cataloged somewhere. So any of these websites that I've mentioned should be fine. I don't have a requirement in the instruction sheet that it can only be an academic source. What I'm trying to help us to do is start the process of researching a little bit in the class. And so I'm asking you to use this epigraph before you start your essay, because it is sometimes a little bit tricky to work in somebody else's quote once you've already started your own story. So an epigraph you might need to see. Let's look up some example ones really quick. Let me look up some famous ones. I know I mentioned Hemingway in class in a few times last week. So let's see. I don't want to do that one. Yeah, let's do this one. I like Huffington Post sometimes. So 17 incredible epigraphs that prove you should always read the first page. That's this is going to be a good one. So let's see what they've got listed here that we know. I was going to say I think one of the most famous epigraphs is probably from Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. This one's a good one. These two epigraphs are at the beginning of Stephen King's book called On Writing, and he has these two listed. The epigraph usually comes a page after the title page, and so you read these two quotes before you start reading the book. Let's see if there's another one. Yep, here's the one I was talking about, The Sun Also Rises. There are two in this one. You Are All a Lost Generation. This was something that he said with a woman named Gertrude Stein. They were talking. They were both living in Paris at the time, and they were talking about art and talking about writers and artists in Paris. And this came up, and so he decided to use it. And then a very famous passage from Ecclesiastes from the Bible. So very famous. These two, again, title page. So this is the cover page. Title page is a piece of paper that has the repetition of the title again. The copyright's usually in the back of the title page, and then usually the epigraph shows up. Let's see if there's another one down here that we all know. I mean, these are all good ones, of course, but just kind of stopping to look at a few. You might not know this one, and unfortunately the image is broken, but The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy is really a beautiful book, and this epigraph is very nice. Never again will a single story be told as though it's the only one. And it's the way the book is told. It gives multiple perspectives from different characters, so this makes a lot of sense when I read that and know how it is applied. And then a very famous book, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And then this is a couple of lines from the epic poem Paradise Lost. And this was the epigraph before the Frankenstein novel. Did I request thee, maker, from my clay to mold me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me? And then if you know what Frankenstein is about, you know how those words sort of play out in the novel. So we looked at those examples because now you can see how they work for your memoir. So the one I chose, I found one, I believe this was from the Goodreads website that I mentioned before, and I found the one that says, and the danger is that in this move toward new horizons and far directions that I may lose what I have now and not find anything except loneliness. And so I'm probably going to end up using this epigraph to talk about surprising things that I experienced as I unpacked that were actually the contrary to what I believed, that when I would move, things would not be the same, and then I actually had a more positive experience. So I'll kind of use it as a contrasting kind of thing. And just so you know, you could deal with the concepts in the epigraph that you choose within any part of your essay. Probably it works best to address them in the body paragraphs and then in the conclusion. So all you need to know about the formatting, and we'll talk about some of this stuff in class next week, is that when you type it in, it should be centered on the page. You guys can see from my formatting that it is indeed centered. And I also have the words from the source italicized, and then I also give credit to the writer. Notice I have these two little hyphens right next to each other. You can actually also just use a dash and then the author's name, the poet's name. Plath happened to be a poet. All right, so that's what you need to do for the epigraph. So the most important thing to do is find something that you think can be applied to your story. Think of an idea. Do a search. Like I said, I did quotes, famous quotes on moving or about moving, and then like whatever your main focus is in your essay, kind of look for it in that way and see what you can find. Or maybe you know a song that deals with exactly what you're writing about and you're going to put it in there. Put an epigraph before your essay starts, and there's a couple lines from the song you want to use. Okay, cool. We will work on a Works Cited page for the epigraph, but we'll do that in class, so I'm not going to cover that now. All right, second thing, thesis. So you see here in red and also now in blue that I have my statement of purpose. So we talked in class, we will talk in class next week a little bit more about purpose. We haven't really been able to get to it yet, but I will tell you very quickly that purpose means the reason the writer writes. And for you guys, and you'll hear me say this many times this semester, for you guys it really boils down to your thinking sometimes is, well, what does Beth want me to say? And so you decide that the reason you're writing is because it was an assignment. Well, that might be true, but I would really like for you to think about what your reason for writing is in addition to that. Yes, I've given you an assignment, but what are you trying to explore or express in your own essay? So I came up with a draft. This is a draft thesis. There are parts of it that I like, parts of it that I think are too mechanical, and I'm going to try to rephrase later. But for now, this is a good start. So you see I have a draft title, and I have a draft introduction paragraph, and then in red I have my draft statement of purpose, which should express the topic I'm writing about and also hint at why I'm writing. So I wrote, baffled, I congratulated myself for all the effort I'd put in the last several days to reduce my life to stacks of boxes. And I walked away, hearing the truck's back door slam shut, not realizing what moving across country might mean later. And so I'm happy with this vision of me getting everything into the back of the semi in boxes, but also not giving too much away that I'm going to have a realization later, but that's also the part that I think is a little bit too mechanical. Like I'm sounding like I'm writing a college essay. And I'm really good at writing college essays, so that's why it sounds like that. But I don't want it to sound like that. So I'm probably going to rephrase this part, this last part. But for now, it's expressing that I'm predicting that I'm going to have a realization, and I don't want it to be that direct. So I have to figure out how I can express that differently. But for now, I'm good. We know my topic, that it's about moving, and then we also know that I'm going to be reflecting on what the move meant, right? Okay, so I'm good. Those two parts, topic and reason writer writes, this idea that I'm realizing something about the move, those two things have been expressed, but I'm still going to revise it. It's not good enough for me. All right, so you have an example statement of purpose in this video, and then you guys can also review the page numbers that I posted for homework that you check out. There's a section on purpose, audience, and thesis statement in the homework, so you might check the textbook and kind of read through that stuff. All right, last, let's go over some conclusion ideas. So let me just get some bullet points started here so I can type some things out. The first thing I want to remind you about a conclusion, the thing that we've learned from teachers in our past, is that it usually echoes the main point, or the thesis, or the statement of purpose, as you've heard me call it tonight, and we'll start in this video, and we'll start hearing me say more and more. So that part's true, but that's not the only thing we do in a conclusion, even in an academic essay, and so that's what I'm going to talk to you about now. It's okay for you to echo that statement of purpose. Make sure you rephrase it and say it in a different way. But some other things that you might do in the memoir is to ask yourself a question and answer it, related to your statement of purpose. You might reflect on why the moment matters to you, especially now. So all the stories we're telling in our memoir are things that have happened to us already, and now that we have matured, even if it's 6 months out, we have a mechanism in our brain to figure out why we decided to write about that topic in the first place. And then that's where this comes in, reflecting on why that moment matters to you. What did it teach you? How did you change? How did you alter your behavior? I mean, there's lots of things you could write about there. I can also just type, talk about the significance of your memory. And I think this one really relates to the bullet point I said above. I've just expressed it a little bit differently. And I also think there would be room for you to play around with the notion of memory. For instance, sometimes some memories are yours and sometimes memories are someone else's. They've told you the story multiple times, so maybe you could reflect on that. And then I think the last thing is, what did you learn? Just kind of broadly. So make sure your conclusion does echo the main point a little, but does something else in addition to that. All right, guys, that's the end of the video. Hope